Hi friends, today we embark on another captivating journey into the shadowy world of true crime stories. Get ready to investigate, discover, and reveal the secrets of a dark and dramatic case. Are you prepared to dive into this thrilling investigation? Let's begin now. On the quiet evening of May 7th, 2017, in the small town of Belir, Ohio, David Kinney's family was on a normal visit with friends. David, his wife Cherry, and their young daughter went to his best friend Brad McGarry's house to return the lawnmower. However, when no one answered the front door, feelings of anxiety began to rise. Deciding to go around to the back, they discovered the service door was slightly open. Stepping inside, they are confronted with a terrifying scene of chaos, and when David examines the basement, he will make a terrible discovery that will change their lives forever. David Kinney, a young man, lived a normal life until his mother threw a big party for his 21st birthday. Among the guests is Cherry, a beautiful single mother who attracts David's attention immediately. The next day, he confided to his mother that he had found true love and was determined to build a relationship with Cherry, despite concerns from his friends about marrying a woman with 3 children. Small. David, with determination and love, was ready to take on the responsibility of raising a new family. He signed up to study to become a coal miner, a difficult but high-paying job. During his training, David met Brad McGarry, a man who had experienced many difficulties living openly with himself in a conservative environment. Brad has endured discrimination but remained steadfast in staying true to himself. Finally, he decided to switch to a career as a coal miner. David and Brad quickly became close friends, with Brad affectionately known as Uncle Brad by David's children. They often share happy moments together. By 2017, David was 30 years old, had a happy family with Cherry and her children. Meanwhile, Brad is balancing work, family, and a secret love affair. On the fateful day of May 7th, after attending a family gathering, Brad told a cousin that he needed to return home. At about 6:15 p.m., David, Cherry, and their youngest daughter visited Brad's house but received no response. After checking around the house, David went inside and discovered Brad's body lying in a pool of blood. Cherry, upon hearing her husband's screams, rushed down and was also shocked by the horrifying scene. They immediately called 911, and when the police arrived, they were faced with a terrible tragedy. David and Cherry recounted their story, emphasizing their close relationship with Brad and the future plans they had. When asked about any enemies or difficult relationships in Brad's life, they said that Brad had just ended a tumultuous relationship with a man named Scotty, although they didn't know much about them. But he described the relationship as often contentious. As witnesses provided information, police began a thorough investigation of the crime scene. In the basement, they discovered Brad McGarry's body lying face down on the floor, surrounded by a large pool of blood. Apparently, he had been shot at least once in the head. Initially, investigators suspected that it may have been a suicide, but when forensic experts arrived, they found no weapons at the scene. This has raised doubts about the suicide hypothesis. When they turned Brad's body over, they discovered no weapon, eliminating the initial possibility of suicide. Continuing to search the house, police found it had been strangely ransacked. The kitchen was messy with many open drawers, and the living room was also in a state of chaos. Although authorities initially suspected it might have been a botched robbery, no items of value were stolen. This made them suspect that the robbery may have been staged. Brad was an openly gay man who worked in a coal mine, and detectives began to consider the possibility that he might have upset some conservative colleagues. However, when they interviewed Brad's colleagues, they found that everyone respected and admired him, disproving this theory. Detectives also interviewed Brad's friends and family to determine the timeline and gather information. According to David and Cherry's testimony, Brad had just ended a toxic relationship with a man named Scotty. Wendy, a friend of Brad's, also confirmed this relationship and said Brad was too interested in Scotty. When investigating Scotty, detectives discovered he was in jail for violating his probation, which ruled him out as the culprit. However, they did not completely eliminate him, as it was possible that Scotty had orchestrated the crime with the help of an accomplice. When visiting Scotty in prison, detectives found him truly shocked by Brad's death. In an effort to find more clues, the police decided to check security cameras around the neighborhood. A neighbor had a camera facing the street near Brad's house, and they began reviewing the footage. The case seemed to be at a dead end until 2 days later. A cousin of Brad's revealed important information. He said Brad left a family lunch between 1:30 and 2 p.m. and mentioned a man named DJ was coming to visit. The cousin also said Brad joked that he planned to take a nap with his guest, hinting at a romantic intention. When detectives investigated further, they discovered that the DJ was actually David, the man who discovered Brad's body. When asked, the cousin confirmed that David was the only person Brad had ever mentioned. This information caused detectives to reconsider the entire case, and they realized that there may be more complications in the relationship between Brad and David. New clues open up a completely different line of investigation, leading to questions about friendship, love, and the secrets they've both kept. When detectives discover that DJ is David, the man who found Brad's body, things start to become clear. Up to that point, David was considered an important witness, appearing shocked and saddened by his friend's death. However, this information immediately turned him into the main suspect. Detectives convinced David to hand over his phone under the guise of needing to get photos related to the crime scene. They tracked David's location around the time of the incident and looked for evidence confirming his relationship with Brad. When they looked at the phone's location data, they discovered that David was at Brad's house at the time of the shooting. Although David deleted the messages in question, a further forensic analysis discovered messages between him and Brad that confirmed their sexual relationship. When reviewing footage from the neighbor's surveillance camera, detectives saw that David drove to Brad's house shortly before the incident, specifically in his wife's car, not his own. They recorded his arrival time and noted that he left about 40 minutes later. The footage also shows David returning a few hours later with his family under the pretense of delivering a lawnmower that Brad had requested. When synthesizing all this evidence, police are confident that they have enough evidence to prove that David was present at Brad's house before and during the time of his death. When detectives presented data from David's phone, he admitted being at the house but changed his story several times during the lengthy interrogation, sometimes giving as many as 7 or 8 different versions. David claimed that an unidentified third man was in Brad's house and, after a heated argument, shot Brad. He claimed that the man threatened him and allowed him to leave. However, detectives did not believe this story, causing David to change his testimony again. Finally, he admitted to hiding his affair with his wife Cherry, but insisted that it only went on for a few months, not years. David said Brad got angry when he tried to end the relationship that afternoon and brandished a gun in his face, scaring him. He said the argument escalated into a struggle in which he tried to grab the gun and accidentally shot Brad in the forehead, claiming he acted in self-defense. David also admitted to firing another shot at Brad while he was on the ground. However, detectives quickly rejected this version, pointing out that the basic laws of physics made David's testimony implausible. Forensic analysis showed that Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, suggesting the shooter was standing behind him. When asked about the weapon, David claimed that he had thrown it away as he fled the scene. Although law enforcement officers combed the area in the days that followed, the murder weapon was never found. Investigators were sure they had enough evidence to arrest David. They allowed him to speak to his wife, Cherry, while their conversation was closely monitored by police. During the conversation, David confesses to Cherry about the incident and expresses regret for not handling things differently, admitting that he cannot undo what has been done. Cherry, shocked by this truth, speechless. David recounted what happened, and when he told the detectives, Cherry broke down in tears, asking if he was mocking her with that explanation and saying she couldn't bear to look at him. This conversation confirmed to police that Cherry had no prior knowledge of the events that occurred, adding further suspicion to David's role in Brad's death. On May 9th, David was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Investigators theorized that Brad, frustrated about keeping their relationship a secret, may have threatened to reveal the truth to Cherry, giving David motive to kill his friend in order to maintain her relationship. Double life. After several days in custody, David appeared in court for a preliminary hearing in mid-May 2017, where he faced charges of Brad's murder. Throughout the hearing, David kept his head down and looked at the floor, while investigators testified and prosecutors focused on inconsistencies in his story. Police described David as visibly distressed at the murder scene, experiencing physical discomfort, including difficulty breathing and bouts of vomiting. David released a written statement, claiming to be just a simple friend who delivered a lawnmower and accidentally discovered Brad's body in the basement. However, the autopsy results became an important turning point, completely destroying David's claim of self-defense, when it showed that the victim Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, which was inconsistent with self-defense. David's defense attorney told the court that David did not pose a threat to society and that Brad's death was the result of extraordinary circumstances. He asserted that if David committed a crime, it would only be manslaughter, not murder. Throughout the nearly 3-hour hearing, David remained silent. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, the judge found probable cause to send the case to district court and set bail at $1 million. David's defense immediately asked for the bail amount to be reduced, arguing that this amount was impossible for David. The judge denied that request. A few weeks later, David's defense attorney filed more than a dozen motions during the hearing, among them another request to reduce David's bail. Many of David's friends and family members attended the hearing to show their support. The attorney asked that the bail be reduced to $250,000, an amount that Kinney's family could manage. He called a number of witnesses, including David's wife, his mother, father-in-law, and stepfather, all of whom testified about David's good character, describing him as a hard-working, capable man, responsibility, as well as a loving husband and father. Cherry testified that her husband had provided emotional and material support to their 3 children for the past 10 years, even though he was not their biological father. During cross-examination, Cherry was asked about the events of May 7th, when David took her and her daughter to Brad's house. She said her husband told her they were returning a lawn mower. When the judge asked if she noticed anything unusual about David that day, Cherry replied that she did not notice anything strange. She described that when they arrived, the back door of the house was open and appeared to have been ransacked before David entered the basement and yelled for her to call 911. After hearing all arguments, the judge concluded that statements regarding David's character did not justify a reduction in bail. He based his decision on the fact that the defendant took his wife and daughter to a house with a dead body on the grounds that he was just passing by and did not know what had happened. The judge also pointed out that David had blatantly lied to his wife and daughter. David's trial begins and lasts a week. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence discussed, including a neighbor's surveillance video showing David going to Brad's house before the incident and returning later with his family. During the trial, one of the most important testimonies came from a forensic expert who analyzed DNA evidence at the scene. The expert revealed that DNA from a used condom showed Brad's DNA on the outside and an unidentified man's DNA on the inside, but no trace of David's DNA. This discovery was controversial because it contradicted the accusations of a detective who believed that David had decided to kill Brad to keep his secret and his family life intact. According to the detective, David lured Brad with the promise of sex, then killed him and tried to cover up the crime. While the defense asserted that David acted out of fear and self-defense, his attorney also admitted that David did not always tell the truth and that some of his actions were odd. However, he emphasized that this does not make David a criminal. The prosecutor countered that the 2 bullets to the back of Brad's head could not be considered self-defense. They argued that Brad was on his knees when he received the first shot to the upper part of his head and the second shot to the lower part of his skull. After hearing arguments, the jury deliberated for 4 tense hours. When they returned, the judge read the verdict unanimously, finding David Kinney guilty of Brad's murder, leaving those in the courtroom gasping and in tears. David got his chance to speak, and he started by apologizing to Brad's family for all the pain he had caused. He said he never intended for any of this to happen and wished he could take it all back. Although David knows that no amount of apology will bring Brad back, he wants his family to know that he is truly sorry for everything that happened. However, the judge was unmoved by David's apology. He recounted the countless lies David told to cover up his actions and claimed that the crime was a cold and calculated execution. The judge emphasized that David premeditated Brad's murder, luring him with the promise of sex, staging the crime scene, and taking many steps to conceal his crime. The judge had 4 sentencing options, all of which involved life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after 20, 25, or 30 years. David's defense attorney urged the judge to choose one of these options, arguing that David had been a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record before that day's tragic events. However, the prosecutor urged the judge to impose a sentence of life in prison without parole, emphasizing that Brad had lost his life and that his family would have to live with that loss forever. In response, the judge stated that if David had the ability to end the life of someone he loved and was his best friend, then it raised concerns about what he could do to those who opposed him, me. Therefore, he could not allow David to return to public life. In February 2018, David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 3 years because of the gun specification, meaning he was in possession of a gun during the commission of a crime. The police commented that the entire case was a tragedy that could have been avoided if David had not been so concerned about keeping his homosexuality a secret. As of mid-2023, prison records show that David remained imprisoned in Ohio from the time of his conviction. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, always seeking a pardon for his client, but those appeals were tragically denied. The case of David Kinney is a tragedy not only about the death of Brad McGarry, but also about the secrets, friendships, and poor decisions that led to the tragedy. David's life, from an ordinary man to a suspect in a murder case, shows that the pressure of keeping his identity and true feelings secret can actually lead to unpredictable consequences. David Kinney's story highlights the conflicts in human relationships, where love and betrayal are intertwined. David had to choose between going public with his feelings and maintaining family life, leading to a tragic end for both Brad and his family. The case raises questions about acceptance and discrimination in society, especially for the LGBTQ community. Discrimination can make people feel cornered, leading to unforgivable actions. The end of the case is a reminder that silence and secrets can be deeply hurtful, leaving an unfillable void for loved ones. David Kinney lost his freedom, and Brad's death was an avoidable tragedy. David Kinney's case is not only a story of crime, but also a lesson about love, acceptance, and the consequences of being untrue to yourself. Hopefully, stories like these will promote more understanding and empathy in society, so that no one has to go through similar tragedies in the future. Please ensure to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell to stay updated on all the intriguing cases in the True Crime Stories series. Be the first to receive updates on dramatic and thrilling crime stories.